Good afternoon, everybody. We are back in our studio in Modi'in in Israel to say welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land. I'm Rolene Marks, your host. No matter where in the world I am, I try to bring you those top stories from Israel every Monday to Thursday. And I'll remind you later where you can find us. But first, let's take a look at those top stories. New video footage has emerged showing police forces running into the hospital that had the body of slain journalist Shirin Abu Akleh before her funeral on Friday. Now, police conduct at her funeral has drawn widespread international condemnation, and Israel's chief of police said that he will be opening up an investigation on their conduct as soon as possible. Meanwhile, there is still no update as to who is responsible for firing the fatal shot that killed Al Jazeera journalist Al Akleh. Operation Breaking Wave, which is the intent to clamp down on terror attacks around the country, continues. Earlier this morning, a Palestinian tried to stab IDF guards at the Samaria regional headquarters in the West Bank. He was neutralized and his condition is unknown. Meanwhile, 5 Palestinians were arrested following riots and protests on the Temple Mount following the funeral of a Palestinian who died as a result of his wounds during clashes on the Temple Mount. Prime Minister Bennett has said Israel will use all instruments to crush the current wave of terror. Now, was anti-Semitism the cause of Michael Ben David, Israel's entry into the Eurovision contest, not making it past the semi-finals? Well, speaking to the Israeli press earlier today, Ben David said that there were many media outlets who refused to interview him because he is Israeli. He said that the news outlets, when they came to interview the various contestants, said, "Oh, you're from Israel? That means we don't want you," and also refused to show footage of the Israeli flags. Ben David said there were numerous Israeli flags in the audience, however, there was no coverage of them on TV. He failed to qualify past the semi-finals, but has said that the experience with anti-Semitism at Eurovision has impacted greatly on him. For the first time, Russian anti-aircraft batteries are reported to have fired on Israeli jets conducting operations in Syria. This is per other publications and quoted by Israel's Channel 13. Now, Israel normally works in cooperation with Russian military forces who are on the ground in Syria because Israel strikes Iranian targets or Iranian attempts to come through Syria and launch attacks on Israeli sovereign territory or smuggle arms from Iran into Syria or to Lebanon. There haven't been more comments from the Israel side with regards to these strikes. Does this mean we have an increase in tension between the two countries? We have seen an exchange of rhetoric between Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov and our foreign minister. However, at the moment, relations still remain intact, and Israel still has to work in cooperation to ensure Iran doesn't encroach on Israeli territory. And speaking of Russia, it has been nearly 3 months since they launched their invasion of Ukraine, which saw many embassies, including Israel's embassy, shut down and relocated to Poland. Well, earlier this morning, our ambassador to Kyiv, Michael Brodsky, raised the Israeli flag and reopened the embassy in the Ukrainian capital with the attendance of Ukrainian officials, sending a very, very important message that embassies are slowly starting to return to Ukraine's beleaguered capital. And those are your top stories from a very exhausted me, having landed early this morning from Helsinki, Finland. And I highly recommend anyone who wants to visit Scandinavia to visit Helsinki. It's a magnificent city. But while you are busy looking for places to visit, don't forget to also check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook page is at Lottel's site. Our community is growing there. We would love you to be a part of it by liking us, following us, and sharing our content. And we're on YouTube. Our channel is The Israel Brief. We would really love it if you hit that red subscribe button. That way we get Israel's narrative out to the public. Many of you say you don't hear very much about what's happening in Israel or Israel's side in the mainstream media. So this goes a long way to sorting out that particular issue. And we're on Twitter at LayOfTheLand5. Follow us there and hey, interact with us. We love it when you do. So just a reminder that I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief. And before I go and catch up on some much needed sleep, I want to thank you for watching and invite you to join me again tomorrow.